Chuck Norris, the iconic martial artist and beloved star of Walker, Texas Ranger, was celebrated for his strength, discipline, and deeply guarded personal life. Even as he rose to become a household name around the globe, he made a point of keeping his private world away from public scrutiny. Yet when the news of his passing broke, an entirely unexpected visitor appeared at his funeral, someone from a hidden corner of his past whose arrival left everyone present in complete disbelief. Who was this person, and what long-buried secret did they carry with them? When word of Chuck Norris's death reached the world, an outpouring of love and remembrance followed almost immediately. Admirers, fellow actors, and prominent political voices all stepped forward to honor the enormous difference he had made in their lives. Chuck was never simply a famous face. He was a towering symbol of inspiration whose reach extended well beyond anything he ever did on a film set. His legacy rested not only on his mastery of martial arts or his acting achievements, but on the warmth, generosity, and drive he brought to everyone fortunate enough to cross his path. The world he left behind is richer for having known him. To those who were truly close to him, Chuck Norris was something far greater than an action star. He served as a guide, a loyal companion, and an endless wellspring of encouragement. His commitment to the people in his life was unwavering, and he never hesitated to offer support or direction when it was needed. His impact came not from the celebrity he carried, but from the sincerity of his character. His gentle power and generosity of spirit made a permanent impression on all who encountered him, and it is that human legacy, not the on-screen heroism, that will endure longest. Texas Governor Greg Abbott was among those who came forward to pay tribute, describing Norris as a genuine hero of the Lone Star State. His words captured a feeling shared by countless Texans who had always seen Chuck as one of their own. Despite the heights of Hollywood fame he had reached, Chuck never turned his back on where he came from. A proud native Texan, he carried the values of his home state with him always, speaking often about hard work, loyalty, and doing what is right. Those qualities made him a figure of deep admiration not just in Texas, but everywhere. Across the world, people found their own ways to pay homage. Flowers accumulated at his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a quiet but powerful expression of the affection fans felt for him. His dojo in Plano, Texas, where so many students had trained under his watchful guidance, became a gathering place for those who wished to remember him. People came together to share stories, to reflect on what he had taught them, and to honor the lessons he had passed on that went far beyond any martial art. His influence was wide and deep, and the tributes that poured in from every walk of life made that undeniably clear. He was not merely a film legend. He was a symbol of resilience and quiet strength, a man who made people feel genuinely seen and valued wherever he went. As the messages and flowers continued arriving from every corner of the globe, it became obvious that Chuck Norris's memory would not fade. He had touched more lives than could easily be counted, and his spirit would live on not only through the films he made but through the lasting example he set. Behind all the fame, he was at his core a humble man, and that humility shone more brightly than any role he ever played. Among all the tributes that came in the days following his passing, one stood apart from the rest in a way no one anticipated. It was not simply a heartfelt statement or a moving speech. It was the presence of a single individual whose appearance at his funeral changed the atmosphere of the entire day. Who was this person, and what made their arrival so remarkable? In the midst of all the grief and remembrance that filled Chuck Norris's funeral, one figure appeared who left everyone stunned into silence. This was not someone from his professional world or a longtime acquaintance. This was someone connected to a chapter of his life he had kept completely hidden for nearly 3 decades. Her sudden appearance transformed an already emotional occasion into one layered with astonishment and unanswered questions. Who was she, and how had she stayed out of sight for so long? Her name was Dina, and she was Chuck Norris's daughter, a person whose very existence he had been unaware of for most of his life. The truth surfaced in 1991. When Dina made the decision to contact Chuck and share a revelation that would shake the foundation of everything he thought he knew about his own past. Decades earlier, Chuck had been briefly involved in an affair that had produced a child. Dina grew up with her mother, raised to believe that a different man was her father. It was only when she reached the age of 16 that her mother finally told her the truth. From that moment, Dina reached out to Chuck, drawing back the curtain on a secret that had been kept for years. For close to 30 years, Chuck Norris had lived without any knowledge that he had a daughter. When the truth finally emerged, it stopped him completely. This hidden chapter, concealed from both the public and from Chuck himself, was a shock of the deepest kind. A storm of emotions followed as the reality settled in, feelings of surprise, guilt, and a profound sadness for all the years he had unknowingly missed. And yet, when he and Dina finally stood face to face, something extraordinary occurred. Chuck opened his arms to her without hesitation, and in that moment, a bond that would only strengthen over time began to take shape between them. What made the occasion even more striking was not simply the knowledge of Dina's existence, but the fact that she chose to be present at his funeral. As those gathered to mourn looked on, there she stood, quietly among the crowd of friends, fans, and colleagues. Her presence was a reminder that behind the legend everyone believed they knew, there were stories still untold and corners still unexplored. Dina's quiet arrival cast new light on a man the world thought it understood completely, inviting everyone there to reconsider who Chuck Norris truly was. For those in the room, Dina's appearance carried a significance that went well beyond surprise. It pointed to the layers beneath Chuck's public image, the parts of his life that fame had never fully revealed. Here was a man revered by millions who had also, unbeknownst to nearly everyone, been a father to a daughter he never had the chance to raise. The funeral, intended as a celebration of his extraordinary life, became something more, a window into a deeply personal story that no one in attendance had ever imagined. Dina's presence marked the resurfacing of a long-closed chapter in Chuck's history. The world had known him as larger than life, but the family secrets he carried remained largely invisible to the public. Her arrival gave the ceremony an added dimension, reminding everyone that even the most famous lives contain hidden depths. The story of Chuck's secret daughter was one of many untold chapters that revealed just how complex and human the man behind the legend truly was. Now the questions that followed were inevitable. Had Chuck known about her before he died? How had this part of his story remained hidden for so long? The answers take us back to the moment Chuck first discovered he had a daughter. In his 2004 memoir, Against All Odds, Chuck Norris gave the world a glimpse into the deeply personal moment when he learned of Dina's existence. She was just 16 years old when she put pen to paper and sent him a letter that would alter the course of both their lives. 4 years, her mother had raised her in silence, never revealing the identity of her true father. It was only when Dina reached her teenage years that her mother finally shared the truth. That discovery marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that would reshape the relationship between father and daughter in ways neither had anticipated. The truth had been buried for a long time, hidden beneath silence, regret, and a mistake that dated back to 1962. That concealed reality had quietly created a distance between Chuck and a daughter he did not even know was his. Then came the day everything changed for Dina. Her mother sat her down and told her plainly that Chuck Norris was her biological father. For a girl who had grown up with an entirely different understanding of her own origins, this was nothing short of world-altering news. In a single conversation, the story she had believed about herself was replaced by one she was only beginning to understand. When Chuck first held Dina's letter in his hands, uncertainty gripped him. The idea that he had a daughter, someone who had existed in the world without his knowledge for all these years, brought with it a flood of difficult emotions. There was guilt for the time that had slipped away, anxiety about what a relationship with her might look like, and a deep unease about reconnecting with something so unexpected from his past. For nearly 3 decades he had lived without awareness of her, and the prospect of suddenly stepping into this new reality felt enormous and daunting. But the moment Chuck finally met Dina in person, every reservation dissolved. Looking at her, he needed no convincing. The recognition was immediate and instinctive, the unmistakable sense that this was his daughter. All the years of absence, all the complicated emotions, gave way in an instant to something far simpler and more powerful. He held her close, and in that embrace, a bond was formed that neither time nor circumstance could take away. It was a meeting that would mark a turning point in both their lives. From that point forward, Chuck was a changed man. The discovery of Dina and the emotional reunion that followed added an entirely new dimension to someone the world had only ever associated with toughness and discipline. He was no longer defined solely by the fearless characters he had brought to life on screen. He was now also a father, stepping into a role he had never had the opportunity to inhabit. That realization reshaped who he was, and the journey of building a relationship with his daughter became one of the most meaningful chapters of his entire life. For Chuck, the meeting with Dina was about far more than simply learning the truth. It was about the possibility of healing, of moving forward after years of regret. Dina was not just a secret from his past. She was a presence in his future, a connection he had never expected to find. Their bond, built slowly and earnestly across the years that followed, became one of the defining relationships of Chuck's later life, forever altering the story of the man behind the legend. But how did their relationship grow? And what kept Dina at a distance for so long before she finally reached out? The details are remarkable. As Chuck and Dina began spending time together, what started as a tentative connection quickly evolved into something genuinely meaningful. For most of her life, Dina had grown up believing a different man was her father. That was the story she had been given, and it had shaped her sense of self and family in profound ways. Everything changed when she happened to overhear a conversation between her mother and someone else, a moment that cracked open a truth she had never been meant to discover. The revelation shook her to her core, shattering the version of her own history she had always taken for granted. For years after learning the truth, Dina carried the weight of it in silence, living with the knowledge that the man tied to her by blood was someone she had never met. Chuck's identity had been carefully shielded by her mother, and only when Dina reached 16 did the full picture finally emerge. In an instant, everything she thought she knew about her family shifted. The emotions that followed were overwhelming, a mixture of confusion, grief, and an urgent need to make sense of this new reality. Yet alongside all of that came a growing curiosity about the man she had never known, and a deep longing to understand the connection they shared. The years after the revelation were not easy for Dina. She wrestled with how to approach a man she knew only through his public image, unsure of how he might receive her and haunted by the question of why he had never been part of her life. It was only when she learned that Chuck and his wife had separated that she finally felt the moment had come. With the steady encouragement of her husband, Damien, she gathered the courage to write to Chuck. It was a step she hoped would bridge the gap between them and open the door to the relationship she had quietly longed for. Chuck's initial response to her letter was cautious. The thought of meeting a child whose existence he had been completely unaware of stirred a complicated mix of feelings inside him. Surprise, doubt, and guilt all surfaced at once. But when they finally came together in person, any hesitation evaporated. The bond between them was real and immediate, something neither of them had to manufacture or force. Chuck welcomed her without reservation, not as a stranger who had arrived unexpectedly, but as his own flesh and blood. As their relationship deepened, Chuck extended his embrace to include Dina's entire family. He saw their arrival in his life as something purposeful, a gift that felt guided by something greater than coincidence. He had always placed great importance on family, faith, and the idea that certain things happen for a reason, and this reunion felt like confirmation of all of that. Every visit, every shared moment, felt like progress toward healing the past and building something new and lasting together. Eventually, Dina and her family relocated to Dallas, bringing them closer to Chuck while he was filming Walker, Texas Ranger. The proximity allowed them to build the kind of everyday closeness that had once seemed impossible. Chuck made it a priority to weave them into the fabric of his life, and the bond that grew between them filled in spaces that had long been left empty. What had once been a painful secret had become the foundation of a loving and deeply cherished family connection. But with Chuck now gone, what is it that Dina will carry forward from the time they shared? Let us look at the final chapter of Chuck Norris's life and the legacy he leaves behind. Chuck Norris was a name that carried enormous weight, synonymous with toughness, perseverance, and an unshakable sense of discipline. His martial arts mastery and his long-running role in Walker, Texas Ranger made him a figure of admiration across the world. And yet beneath that formidable exterior was a man who guarded his inner life with great care. The millions who admired him on screen knew only a version of him. The real Chuck Norris preferred the quiet, kept his most personal truths close, and placed his privacy above his fame. Even as his career reached extraordinary heights, Chuck managed to keep a sense of mystery about him. The attention of the world never changed who he was at his core. He shielded his personal life, his relationships, and his family from the constant pressure of public scrutiny. For him, peace was found in the still moments, away from cameras and crowds. His ability to remain grounded amid global recognition set him apart, a man who valued simplicity and solitude over the glare of celebrity. Chuck Norris passed away on March 19, 2026, at his beloved Texas ranch, the place where he had long retreated for quiet and reflection. His passing, true to his character, was gentle and unassuming. There were no elaborate public ceremonies, no televised memorials. The world did not see a grand spectacle unfold. Instead, Chuck slipped away as he had lived, calmly, privately, surrounded only by the people closest to him, at peace in the place he loved most. In a world where celebrity deaths are often marked by enormous public displays of mourning, Chuck's departure stood apart. He had never sought the spotlight for its own sake, and he would not have wanted it at the end either. His legacy was rooted in something quieter and more enduring than fame, in self-discipline, integrity, and the dignity of living according to one's own values. The people who truly knew him understood that the man behind the legend was always more complex and more human than any role he had played. His passing, though deeply mourned, was entirely in keeping with who he had always been. He had lived on his own terms, and he left the world on those same terms, with quiet grace and without fanfare. The tributes that followed spoke not of spectacle but of substance, honoring a man whose greatest achievement was perhaps simply the authenticity with which he had lived. Chuck's legacy is one of genuine humility, inner strength, and an unswerving commitment to being true to himself. There was no noise, no grand farewell performance. Chuck's death was marked by the same solemn stillness he had always preferred. He was a man who had chosen peace over the flash of fame, and his final departure honored that choice completely. Yet beyond the grief of his passing came lingering questions about his secret daughter, and whether he ever made peace with the circumstances that had led to her existence. Those answers reveal yet another deeply human side of the man the world thought it knew. Even with Dina and her family welcomed fully into his life, the guilt of his past never fully loosened its grip on Chuck. The infidelity that had set this entire story in motion was something he carried with great seriousness, especially given the depth of his Christian faith. He returned often in his thoughts to the choices he had made, seeking forgiveness and striving to find peace. His faith gave him a framework for navigating that struggle, but the weight of those regrets was real and lasting. The guilt ran deep. It was not simply about the years he had spent unknowing, but about the hurt his actions had caused to others, most of all to Dina's mother. The pain of that came back to him fully, and rather than look away from it, Chuck did something requiring considerable courage. He offered a public apology to Dina's mother, acknowledging plainly the harm he had caused and taking full responsibility for the deception that had kept him out of their lives for so long. And yet no apology, however sincere, could reclaim what had been lost. The missing birthdays, the years of separation, the relationship that could have been built so much earlier, those gaps remained a permanent part of the story. Chuck had made mistakes, as all human beings do, and the consequences of those mistakes could not simply be wished away. Even a man of his extraordinary strength and discipline had to live with that, and he did so with as much humility and honesty as he could summon. What he could do, and did do, was embrace Dina and her family wholeheartedly. In doing so, he took responsibility not through words alone but through action, by nurturing the relationship he had never had the chance to build and by showing up as the father he had not been able to be earlier. For Chuck, it was a path toward healing, and the love that Dina and her family returned to him helped ease the burden of the past, even if it could not erase it entirely. Their relationship was not without complexity. The shadow of those lost years never fully lifted, and the reality that Dina had grown up without him would always be part of their shared history. But Chuck found in that painful truth an equally powerful lesson about the grace of second chances. What had begun in secrecy and sorrow had grown into something genuine and life-giving, a testament to the idea that even the most tangled pasts can open onto new and meaningful beginnings. In the end, what Chuck and Dina built together stood as proof that redemption is possible. Their bond did not undo the past, but it created something real in the present, new memories, genuine connection, and a love that neither of them had expected to find. Though Chuck carried remorse for the mistake that had begun it all, he also carried gratitude for the relationship it had ultimately made possible. Their story offers a lesson worth sitting with. And now, a look at the quiet life Dina chose for herself in the years that followed. Though Chuck was open about his relationship with Dina, she herself had no desire for the attention that came with being his daughter. She had not sought out this connection for recognition or fame. The celebrity that surrounded her father's name held no appeal for her. She wanted simply to live her life, peacefully and away from public scrutiny, free to define herself on her own terms rather than through the lens of someone else's fame. When the two finally came together, the reunion was full of warmth and genuine feeling. Chuck welcomed her completely, but Dina made her wishes clear from the start. This relationship was precious to her precisely because it was personal, not because it gave her access to a famous name. She had no interest in trading on it or placing it on public display. Her goal was something far simpler and far more meaningful, to know her father as a person and to build something real between them, away from the noise of the world. That instinct mirrored something central to Chuck's own character. Throughout his years in the public eye, he had worked hard to maintain boundaries around his private life, stepping back from the attention he could easily have courted. Privacy mattered deeply to him, and he had guarded it carefully. In Dina's choice to live quietly and without public drama, Chuck's own values were clearly reflected. Like father, like daughter, both preferring the peace of a life lived away from the spotlight. What the two of them shared remained largely theirs alone, known only to those within their closest circle. Dina had no interest in inviting the world into something so intimate. She wanted a real relationship with her father, not a public narrative about one. In choosing that path, she made a quiet but meaningful statement about what truly matters, that some of the most important things in life are best kept close, cherished privately, and protected from the pressure of outside eyes. That same desire for peace was something Chuck had increasingly leaned into as he grew older. In his later years, family, faith, and personal connection mattered more to him than any spotlight. Dina's way of living echoed that shift. She was not interested in the stories that fame creates. She was interested in the real thing, the actual people, the actual bonds, the actual life being lived each day. When Chuck died, Dina's quiet presence at his funeral said everything without saying a word. She came to honor her father, not to draw attention to herself. She stood among the mourners as someone who had shared something deeply private with a very public man. Her being there was a final reflection of the relationship they had built, a bond rooted in honesty, privacy, and love. Chuck had touched millions through his work. But it was the people closest to him, including the daughter he had only come to know later in life, who truly knew the man behind the legend. So, what do you think about the presence of Chuck's secret daughter at his funeral? Will it earn her more respect? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.